The shoes gave him away every time. Ethan Cole walked through the glass lobby of Vantara Technologies at 7:43 inches the morning, 17 minutes late, and the worn-out soles of his black work shoes made a soft, embarrassing squeak against the polished marble floor. He kept his head down. He had learned, over the past 8 months, that keeping his head down was the fastest way to cross the lobby without collecting too many looks. It didn't always work. There he is. Derek Paulson's voice carried from the cluster of marketing associates gathered near the elevator bank. He said it the way people announce the arrival of something slightly ridiculous, a circus act, a stray animal that keeps wandering in from the street. 7:43. A new record. Laughter. Not loud, not cruel enough to be worth reporting. Just quiet, comfortable, the kind of laughter shared between people who understand each other perfectly and have decided, together, that someone else is the joke. Ethan pressed the button for the service elevator. He waited. He was 38 years old, and he looked it, or maybe a little older. His face had the kind of tired quality that comes not from years but from sleeplessness, from worry compounded nightly into something that settles into the skin permanently. His dark hair was cut short and unevenly, the kind of haircut a man gives himself in a bathroom mirror at midnight. His janitor's uniform, gray polo, dark slacks, was clean but visibly stressed at the collar, a small fraying at the left cuff that he kept meaning to mend. Inside his chest pocket, folded into a small square, was a prescription list. 6 medications, 3 pharmacies, 1 7-year-old girl. The service elevator opened. He stepped in. His name was on a laminated card near the cleaning supply closet on the 14th floor. E. He had read it, the first week, with the specific kind of humiliation that comes from seeing your entire identity compressed into a building management system. 8 months ago, he would have had a nameplate on a desk, a corner office, a title that required a hyphen. Now he had a laminated card and a mop. He pulled the card out and began the morning round, the same route he had memorized in his first week, moving through the corridors with the practiced invisibility of someone who has learned to become part of the background. Conference rooms, open floor plan, kitchen, restrooms. The building was alive with the morning energy of people who believed their work mattered. Sales calls, presentation, rehearsals, the clatter of keyboards. Ethan moved through it all like a current of air. Cole. The voice belonged to Warren Hicks, the facilities manager. He was standing at the end of the corridor with a clipboard and the satisfied expression of a man who had found, again, exactly the evidence he had been looking for. 3rd time this month you've been late. You know what that means. I know, Ethan said. Formal warning. 1 more and we're having a conversation with HR. I understand. Warren looked at him for a moment, as if expecting something, an excuse, a protest, a crack in the surface. Ethan gave him nothing. After a moment, Warren ticked something on his clipboard and walked away. From the open floor plan nearby, someone laughed at something on their screen. Someone else called across the room. Did you see the janitor? Dude shows up late every single day and doesn't even bother explaining himself. The reply, classic loser behavior. Ethan kept moving. Inside his shirt pocket, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out without stopping. Dr. Reeves. 7:51 a.m. Lily had a difficult night. Sinus rhythm irregular. We've adjusted her medication. Please call when you can. He stopped. Just for a moment. Just long enough to read the message twice, to make sure he had understood it. To compress whatever rose in his chest back down into something manageable. Then he kept moving. He called Dr. Reeves from the supply closet. Door half closed, voice low. She's stable, the doctor said. The irregularity was brief. We caught it early. But Ethan, her condition is progressing. We need to talk about the next phase of treatment when you come in. What does the next phase mean? A pause. Let's talk in person. He stood in the supply closet for a long moment after the call ended. Around him, bottles of cleaning solution, rolls of paper towels, a mop leaning against the shelf. The smell of industrial lemon. Somewhere in this building, 47 floors of people were solving problems, closing deals, building things, and his daughter, 7 years old, with his same dark eyes and a laugh like a small bell, was in a hospital bed 4 miles away, her heart misfiring. He put his phone back in his pocket. He picked up the mop. He kept moving. The number 38 bus left downtown at 5:47 p.m. and arrived at Mercy General Hospital at 6:23, give or take. Ethan had learned to take the seat near the back door so he could be the first one off. He had learned to bring food in a paper bag because the hospital cafeteria closed at 6, and the vending machines on Lily's floor were unreliable. He always brought her something: a small juice box, a packet of animal crackers, something small enough to fit in his pocket, significant enough to matter. Lily's room was on the 4th floor, pediatric cardiology, 3rd door on the right. He had walked that corridor so many times he could do it in the dark. He had done it in the dark, once during a power outage. He had not been afraid. She was awake when he arrived. Daddy. Her face changed when she saw him, the specific illumination that only children can produce, the one that makes adults feel briefly invincible and deeply unworthy in the same moment. She was small in the hospital bed, smaller than she should have been for her age, her dark hair spread across the pillow. A small pulse oximeter on her finger, leads on her chest, hidden under her hospital gown. "Hey, Bug." He sat down and pulled his chair close and took her hand the way he did every night. Her fingers were thin. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Dr. Reeves said my heart was being weird last night. I heard. Is that bad?" He looked at her. 7 years old, and already she was asking the serious questions with that measured calm, that particular bravery she had developed in the years since her diagnosis. Lily Cole, who was afraid of thunderstorms and loud dogs but not, apparently, of her own failing heart. "It means we're paying close attention," he said. "That's what the machines are for." She considered this. "Okay." He opened the paper bag. Animal crackers. She took them with her free hand and began sorting them by species on the bed tray, a ritual she had invented during the first long hospitalization 2 years ago and maintained ever since. "Did anything interesting happen today?" she asked. He thought about Warren and his clipboard. He thought about Derek Paulson and his easy laughter. He thought about the supply closet and Dr. Reeves's voice on the phone, "Let's talk in person." "I mopped a very long hallway," he said. She laughed. Was it impressive? Record-breaking. She sorted her crackers. He held her hand. The machines beeped their steady, mechanical reassurance. Outside the window, the city was doing what cities do at dusk, losing its edges, going soft and lit. He had sold the house 14 months ago. It was a 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, the house he and Claire had bought together the year before Lily was born. Claire had left when Lily was 2, not because she was cruel, or at least Ethan had trained himself not to think of it that way, but because she had looked at their life, the diagnosis, the prognosis, the weight of it, and found that she could not hold it. Some people couldn't. He had learned not to judge that. He had also learned not to forget it. The house went first, then the car, then the 401, cashed, early with penalties he hadn't had the bandwidth to calculate. The severance from his former job, senior infrastructure engineer at a cybersecurity firm, had lasted longer than he'd expected and shorter than he'd needed. He had taken the janitorial position because it was the first thing offered, because it came with health insurance, because the health insurance was non-negotiable. He had not told anyone he used to be an engineer. It had seemed, at the time, irrelevant. It had remained irrelevant until it wasn't. He stayed until 9. He always stayed until 9. When Lily fell asleep, he sat in the chair beside her bed and watched her breathe. The machines measured her in numbers. He had taught himself to understand oxygen, saturation, heart rate, rhythm. He knew what the numbers meant. He knew which fluctuations were normal and which ones required pressing the call button. He had become, out of necessity, fluent in a language he had never wanted to learn. Before he left, he kissed her forehead. "I'll be back tomorrow, Bug." She didn't stir. He took the bus home. He lay down on the pull-out sofa in the apartment he rented a studio, the smallest one available, and stared at the ceiling and tried to sleep. Most nights, he almost succeeded. Olivia Grant arrived at Vantara Technologies at 6:15 a.m. every morning, which meant she was always the first car in the executive parking structure and usually the last one to leave. She was 36 years old, the youngest CEO in the company's history, and she had earned that distinction the hard way, not through inheritance or luck or a single brilliant moment, but through the kind of sustained, relentless competence that gradually eliminates every other explanation. She was not unkind. She was precise. There was a difference, she had learned, though other people often had trouble seeing it. Kindness was subjective, variable, dependent on the mood of the giver. Precision was consistent. You could rely on precision. She ran her company the way a precision instrument runs: no wasted motion, no unnecessary heat. Her assistant, a sharp young man named Connor Briggs, had learned to give her the numbers first and the context second. Her executive team had learned to arrive at meetings with solutions, not problems. And everyone else, the 1,200 employees across the 14 floors she commanded, had learned, gradually, that the best way to navigate Olivia Grant's attention was to perform so well that you never attracted it. She noticed Ethan Cole exactly once before the night everything changed. It was a Wednesday, 3 weeks into October, and she was walking the floor with Connor when she saw the man with the cart by the window, gray uniform, dark hair, something slightly wrong about the way he was standing, slightly too still, slightly too present for someone who was supposed to be background. "Who is that?" she asked. Connor glanced. "Maintenance, Cole, I think. He's been written up for tardiness." She watched him for one more second. There was something in his posture she couldn't name. Not defiance, not defeat. Something held. Something compressed. "Flag his file for HR," she said, and kept walking. She did not think about him again. Not until the night the company almost died. That same month, Vantara was 3 weeks away from closing the largest infrastructure contract in its history, a $47 million deal with Hargrove Financial, a mid-Atlantic banking group that had spent 14 months evaluating security firms before settling on Vantara's proposal. The deal was, as her CFO, Raymond Wolf, had told her, with the specific understatement of financial people delivering good news, transformative. It was also fragile. Hargrove's legal team had insisted on a 30-day live system evaluation period, during which Vantara's security infrastructure would be monitored in real time. Any system instability, any downtime, any anomalous behavior during that window could void the contract. The evaluation window opened November 1st. The crisis began November 8th. It started at 11:17 p.m. Ethan was still in the building. He was always in the building late on Thursdays. His shift officially ended at 7. But he had developed the habit of staying to complete tasks that were harder to do when the floors were full of people. He didn't mind the quiet building. In some ways, he preferred it. He was buffing the floor on the 12th level when his phone showed a notification he didn't expect, a system alert from the building's internal network, pushed to all staff devices. He would have ignored it. It wasn't his department. It wasn't his problem, but the language of the alert stopped him. Critical system fault. Data routing anomaly detected across primary and backup servers. Infrastructure integrity compromised. Immediate technical response required. He stood there for a moment, buffer humming beneath his hands. He knew that language. He had written alerts like that himself. Once. He knew what routing anomaly across primary and backup servers meant. It meant the failover hadn't worked. It meant both systems were degraded simultaneously. It meant someone had made an architectural error they probably didn't know they'd made until now. He called IT support. The line rang 9 times and rolled to voicemail. He called the after-hours emergency line. Voicemail again. He stood in the hallway and looked at the alert on his phone and thought about Lily and the next phase of treatment and the $47 million contract that kept this company alive, which kept his health insurance alive, which kept his daughter alive. Then he went to the server room. The server room was on the 13th floor, behind a card access door. His maintenance badge, which accessed most of the building, did not access the server room. He stood at the door for 15 seconds, thinking, then walked to the security desk on that floor where the overnight guard, a heavy-set man named Gerald Moss, was watching something on his phone with earbuds in. Gerald. He had learned Gerald's name in the first week. He had learned everyone's name. I need to get into the server room. There's a critical system fault and IT isn't answering. Gerald looked up, pulled out an earbud. You're the janitor. I know. But I used to be an infrastructure engineer. The system alert is a routing cascade if it's not addressed in the next couple of hours. The primary data pipeline for the Hargrove evaluation will go offline. That's a $47 million contract. Gerald looked at him for a long time. Then he looked at his phone. Then he pulled up something the alert, Ethan assumed, now spreading across the building's internal system, and looked at Ethan again. If this goes wrong, Gerald said, I'm blaming you. That's fair, Ethan said. Gerald opened the door. The server room was cold and loud, and lit the specific blue-white of emergency lighting. Ethan stood in the doorway for 3 seconds, letting his eyes adjust, letting the old knowledge come back the way old knowledge does not as a flood, but as a slow, familiar return. Like visiting a place you lived in once and finding that your body still remembers where the light switches are. He sat down at the monitoring terminal. The architecture was different from what he'd worked with, newer, more layered, but the underlying logic was the same. He navigated the system carefully. The way you move through a room where something is broken on the floor and you don't yet know where. His hands on the keyboard moved with a certainty that his hands had not moved with in over a year. The fault was exactly what he'd suspected, a cascading routing error, originating in a configuration file that had been updated 3 days ago, a small change. The kind that gets approved quickly because it looks trivial. The change had introduced a conflict between the primary and backup routing tables that remained dormant until a specific load threshold was crossed. Tonight, with a scheduled data transfer for the Hargrove evaluation running in background, that threshold had been crossed. He identified the conflict. He mapped the correction. He tested the correction in the sandbox environment first the way you're supposed to, the way trained engineers do it, and watched it hold. Then he applied it to the live system and waited. His phone rang at 12:44 a.m. It was Dr. Reeves. He answered it without stopping, watching the monitoring screen. Ethan. The doctor's voice was different from its daytime register. Lower, more careful. Lily's had another episode. Her rhythm is more unstable than we expected. She's okay, she's stable, but I need you to understand. We need to move on the procedure. We've been waiting to see if she'd stabilize on her own. She hasn't. What kind of procedure? Catheter ablation. We talked about it at the last meeting as a possibility. Given tonight, it's become a necessity. The good news is she's a strong candidate. The concern is timing and cost. He kept watching the screen. The routing tables were stabilizing. Green indicators spreading from left to right like a slow breath. How much? He said. Dr. Reeves quoted a number. Ethan had been expecting a large number, and the number Dr. Reeves gave him was larger than the large number he had been expecting. I understand, he said. I'll call you tomorrow. He hung up. On the screen, the last indicator went green. The system was restored. The Hargrove data pipeline was intact. In 3 hours, the automated morning report would run, and no one would know that anything had happened. He sat there for a moment, in the cold blue light, alone. Then he got up, walked out, let the door lock behind him, nodded at Gerald, who was watching him with an expression that had changed from skepticism to something more complicated, and went back to the 12th floor to collect his cart. He finished buffing the floor. He took the 1:15 a.m. bus home. He lay on the pull-out sofa and stared at the ceiling and did not sleep at all. There was a moment, sometime around 3 a.m. in that narrow apartment, when Ethan understood something clearly for the first time. He had saved the company tonight. He knew that with the particular certainty of someone who has done a thing well and knows it. The system was restored, the contract was intact, and by morning, $47 million would still be in motion. He had done it alone, without resources, without authorization, without anyone asking him to mew, using skills that no one in that building knew he had, and it had cost him nothing except time he didn't have. That was the problem. The number Dr. Reeves had given him was not a number he could reach, not at his current salary, not in any realistic time frame. He had run the math already. He was always running the math, and the math kept arriving at the same answer, which was that there was no version of his current situation in which he could fund what Lily needed. He thought about calling in a favor. He had, once, a network, former colleagues, people he'd worked alongside in the years before everything changed. He had not reached out to any of them in over a year. He had not been able to make himself do it. The combination of pride and shame was specific and powerful, and he had not yet found a way past it. He thought about Lily in the hospital bed, sorting her animal crackers by species. He thought about the question she'd asked him 2 weeks ago, one evening when the room was quiet. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" he had said. Always. He had said it without hesitating, which was the only way to say it. He arrived at work the next morning at 7:41, 2 minutes earlier than the day before. He clocked in without speaking to anyone, collected his cart, and began his round. No one knew. That was the thing about invisibility, it was symmetrical. The people who didn't see you when you failed also didn't see you when you saved them. He was mopping the corridor near the executive floor when Connor Briggs walked past him at speed, phone to his ear, saying something about overnight and system recovery in a tone that indicated someone was getting credit for something, and it was not the man with the mop. Olivia Grant found out at 8:52 a.m. She was in her office, reviewing the Hargrove evaluation report, all green, all normal, all functioning, when Raymond Wolfe knocked and entered without waiting, which was not something Raymond Wolfe did without reason. "We had an incident last night," he said. She looked up. He set a printed report on her desk. He had highlighted 2 lines. She read them. System fault, 11:17 p.m. System restored, 12:53 a.m. Total downtime, 0. Hargrove pipeline, uninterrupted. "Who handled it?" "That's the thing," Raymond said. "IT has no record of responding. The after-hours line has 3 missed calls from an internal extension maintenance floor 12. The server room access log shows badge entry at 11:42 p.m. using a security override from the overnight guard." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "Show me the security footage." The footage was from 3 cameras: the corridor outside the server room, the interior of the server room itself, and the hallway by the security desk. Connor queued it up in the conference room, and Olivia watched it alone. She watched a man in a gray maintenance uniform approach the security desk. She watched him speak to the guard calmly, unhurried, and gesture once toward a phone, presumably showing the system alert. She watched the guard stand, think, and unlock the door. She watched the man in the gray uniform sit at the monitoring terminal and begin working. He worked for just over an hour. He did not rush. He did not appear anxious. He moved through the system with the quiet confidence of someone who has done this kind of work for a long time. At one point, his phone lit up, and he answered it, a call that lasted 4 minutes, during which he did not stop watching the screen, his free hand continuing to work the keyboard, and whatever was said on that call, whatever news came through it, did not break his concentration. His jaw tightened. That was all. Then the call ended, and he kept working. The last 10 minutes of the footage. The indicators going green. The man sitting still for a moment, looking at the screen. Then standing, straightening, pressing his palms flat against the desk once, briefly, like someone collecting themselves. Then he walked out. Olivia watched the footage twice. Then she called Connor in. "Find me everything on the maintenance employee who accessed the server room last night." Connor came back 40 minutes later with a file that surprised him. She could tell by the particular quality of his expression. The way he set the folder on her desk a little more carefully than usual. Ethan James Cole, 38. Hired 8 months ago as a facilities maintenance technician. Before that, 6 years as a senior infrastructure engineer at Meridian Security Systems, where his annual performance reviews used words like exceptional and irreplaceable. Before that, a computer science degree from a state university, a master's in network systems architecture, a career trajectory that had been pointing, unambiguously, upward. 3 years ago, his trajectory changed. Connor had also pulled the medical insurance records, not the details, but the claim volume, which was visible in the aggregate. What those records showed was a level of medical expenditure consistent with a severely ill dependent. Ongoing. Sustained. Significant. "He has a daughter," Connor said. "She's in pediatric cardiology at Mercy General." Olivia closed the folder. She sat for a long time at her desk, looking at nothing. She thought about the way she had seen him in the hallway 3 weeks ago flag his file for HR with the casual authority of someone who has never had to consider what it costs to be late. She thought about the alert he had responded to, alone, in the middle of the night, while her entire IT department slept through their phones. She thought about the phone call he had taken during the repair. The 4 minutes during which something had happened to his face that the camera caught, even at low resolution. She thought about the $47 million that was still intact this morning, because a man in worn-out shoes had stayed late and known what to do. She picked up her coat. "Cancel my 9:30, she said. Mercy General's pediatric cardiology ward had a particular smell antiseptic with something underneath it. Something warm. The accumulated breath of children and the people who loved them. Olivia noticed it when she stepped off the elevator on the 4th floor, and it did something unexpected to her composure. She found the room on her own. Room 412. The door was open. Ethan was inside, asleep in the chair beside the bed. He was still in his uniform. He had come straight from work, she realized, and he was folded into the hospital chair with the boneless, total exhaustion of someone who has been running on inadequate sleep for so long that sleep, when it finally arrives, takes no excuses. The girl in the bed was awake. She was small, dark-haired, with a pulse oximeter on her finger and an arrangement of plastic animal crackers on her tray table, organized with evident deliberateness. She looked at Olivia with curious, unafraid eyes. "Hi," she said, quietly enough not to wake her father. "Hi," Olivia said. "Are you a doctor?" "No. I work with your dad." Lily looked at her for a moment, then at her father's sleeping face, then back at Olivia. "He's really tired," she said. "I know. He thinks I don't notice, but I do." She picked up a small elephant from the tray and turned it in her fingers. "He always acts like everything is okay, even when it's not." Olivia stood in the doorway and felt something shift in her chest, a slow movement, like a plate adjusting deep underground. She had built her entire professional identity on the principle that feeling things was a distraction from doing things. She had been largely correct about this. She was discovering, standing in this doorway, that the principle had gaps. Ethan woke up. He opened his eyes the way exhausted people do slowly, in stages, reality assembling itself from incomplete information. Then he saw her, and his face went through several things in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, alarm. He sat up straight. "Miss Grant, I'm sorry to come here unannounced." She stepped into the room. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "How much trouble am I in?" "None." She sat down in the chair near the window, the one that was not his chair, the empty one that had probably been empty for months. "You saved a $47 million contract last night." You did it alone, in the middle of the night, using skills that are not anywhere on your employee file. And then you came back this morning and mopped floors." She paused. "I have some questions. I figured you might. Why didn't you tell anyone what you could do?" He looked at his daughter, who was studiously arranging her crackers and very obviously listening to every word. "It didn't seem relevant," he said. "It is extremely relevant. At the time I took the job, I needed health insurance. The job had health insurance. My qualifications weren't the point." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "What do you need?" she said. "Right now." "Actually need?" He looked at her. The question had caught him, she could see it. The moment he registered that she meant it literally. It was the look of someone who has been asked to want something after a long period of having that option removed. "Her doctor called last night," he said. "Finally. During the repair, actually. She needs a procedure. Catheter ablation." He named the cost. He said it the way you say a number when you've said it to yourself so many times it has lost its power to frighten you, which is different from it having lost its power to hurt you. Olivia nodded. "That's manageable. For you, maybe. I mean, I'll manage it. Vantara will cover it." She watched his face. "Don't argue with me. You saved this company last night. This is the minimum." He opened his mouth. Closed it. Lily looked up from her crackers. "Daddy," she said, in the practical tone of a 7-year-old cutting through adult complexity. "I think she's trying to help." The silence that followed was the kind that holds something fragile, something that has not yet been named and might break if anyone moves too quickly. Ethan pressed his hands to his face. Just for a moment. His shoulders moved once. When he looked up, his eyes were red. "Why would you do this?" he said. Olivia thought about the footage, the way he'd kept working while the call came in, the way his jaw had tightened and that had been all, the way he'd pressed his palms to the desk when it was over, just for a second, just long enough to keep himself together. "Because I should have seen you sooner," she said. It was not a complete answer. It was not a comfortable answer. It was, however, the true one. The procedure was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In those 2 weeks, things changed in the specific way that real things change, not all at once, not dramatically, but in the accumulation of small adjustments that eventually add up to something unrecognizable from the starting point. Ethan was formally transferred to Vantara's IT infrastructure team, at a salary that reflected what he was actually worth to the company. His new role, infrastructure recovery specialist, a title Connor had drafted and Olivia had approved in the same meeting, meant that the skills he had been carrying in silence for 8 months became, suddenly, the entire point of his presence in the building. His first week in the new role, 2 of his new colleagues spent an hour explaining the system architecture to him. He listened politely and then, at the end of the hour, identified 3 vulnerabilities that had been present in the system for at least 18 months. His second week, Warren Hicks passed him in the corridor, looked at him for a moment with the particular discomfort of someone recalibrating a categorization that had seemed permanent, and said nothing. Derek Paulson said, "I heard you used to be an engineer. Why didn't you say anything?" Ethan looked at him. "You never asked." Olivia came to the hospital the morning of Lily's procedure. She had not planned to. She had planned to send Connor with a card and a plant, which was the appropriate professional gesture, the kind that maintains a courteous distance. She had, instead, found herself driving to Mercy General at 6:45 a.m. in the particular grip of an impulse she didn't entirely understand and had decided to stop fighting. The waiting room outside Pediatric Surgical was beige and too bright and had chairs bolted together in rows, the kind of room designed to be endured rather than occupied. Ethan was in the corner with a paper cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. He looked up when she sat down. "You came," he said. "I did. You didn't have to. I know that." They sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that, between certain people, is not empty, but full. Full of the things that don't need to be said because they're already understood. She asked me about you, Ethan said. What did she ask? She asked if you were going to come back. He looked at the paper cup. She liked you. She doesn't like everyone. I liked her too. Olivia paused. She's incredibly perceptive for 7. She gets that from her mother. He said it without bitterness, just as a fact. The way you say things that used to have sharp edges and have been handled long enough to go smooth. Olivia thought about what she knew of his file, the gaps in the employment history, the single-parent designation, the medical claims going back 3 years. She thought about the weight of it, the accumulated, sustained, solitary weight of it, and how he had carried it for years without, apparently, putting it down. Do you have anyone, she said, other than her? He thought about it seriously. Gerald, he said, the overnight security guard. She almost laughed. That's not a lot. It was enough. He looked at her. Until now. The procedure took 4 hours. Doctor. Reeves came out at 2 in the afternoon with the expression that surgeons wear when things have gone the way things were supposed to go. Careful relief, not quite celebration. The professional version of yes, she's in recovery. Everything went well. We'll monitor her through the night, but the ablation was successful. The pathway, causing the irregular rhythm, has been corrected. Ethan sat very still for a moment. Then he nodded. Olivia was not prepared for what happened next, which was that he turned to her the way you turn to someone who is simply there, simply present, the reflex of a person who needs to absorb something with another person nearby, and she found that she was already turning toward him, and neither of them quite chose it. She didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. He didn't say anything either. They sat there, in the too bright waiting room with the bolted-together chairs, and the city moved outside the windows, and Lily Cole's repaired heart beat steadily in the room down the hall. Lily was discharged 11 days later, on a Tuesday, in the particular way that hospital discharges happen, a convergence of paperwork and farewells, and the sudden, almost disorienting transition from the monitored certainty of a medical environment to the open, ordinary air of the outside world. Ethan pushed her wheelchair to the exit because she was not yet cleared for sustained walking, and she sat in it with the regal tolerance of a child who has accepted that adults have rules but maintains her dignity regardless. Olivia was outside, waiting by the car she had offered to drive them home in. She had a small paper bag from the bakery 3 blocks from the hospital animal crackers, which she had purchased with the specific intentionality of someone doing research. Lily looked at the bag, looked at Olivia. Are those elephants in there? She said. They might be. I like the elephants best. The lions are too aggressive. That seems accurate, Olivia said. Ethan looked at her over Lily's head, the specific look of a parent watching their child accept someone, and something in it was so unguarded that Olivia looked away first, not from discomfort but from the peculiar vulnerability of being seen accurately. 3 months later, the Hargrove deal closed, as expected, on the terms that had been negotiated. It was, as Raymond Wolfe had predicted, transformative. The press release called it a milestone. The office celebrated with catered lunch and a brief speech from Olivia that Connor told her afterward was warmer than usual, which she took as a compliment. In the IT infrastructure department, Ethan Cole had, in those 3 months, quietly become indispensable in the way that people with deep, genuine skill become indispensable not loudly, not by announcing themselves, but by solving problems so thoroughly that the problems stay solved. His new colleagues, younger, formally credentialed, initially uncertain what to make of him had, over the course of several late evenings and one genuinely difficult system migration, arrived at the consensus that was expressed most succinctly by a 26-year-old network analyst named Patrick Heller, who said to a colleague, "I don't know where he's been for the last few years, but I'm really glad he ended up here. He still came in early. He still came in late. He still moved through the building with the quality of someone who notices things, exits, and light sources, and the names of the people other people don't bother to learn. but the worn-out shoes had been replaced and the uniform was gone. And when he walked through the lobby now, he walked differently. Not with arrogance, with a different kind of settledness, the settledness of a person who has located something they had misplaced. Lily started second grade in September. She was the kind of student teachers describe, in their careful professional language, as enthusiastic and socially sophisticated, which meant she talked constantly and was beloved for it. Her cardiologist had cleared her for all normal activities, with quarterly monitoring. Her heart, the repaired one, was holding. Every Friday evening, the three of them had dinner. This had not been formally decided, it had assembled itself. Incrementally, over the months, each week's invitation becoming less of an invitation and more of an assumption, until the assumption had calcified into routine, and routine had softened into something that didn't need a name to be real. Olivia had discovered, over those Friday evenings, things about herself that she had not previously had access to, that she found genuine pleasure in being made to laugh by a 7-year-old who delivered her jokes with the timing of a professional, that she was capable of sitting at a table without her phone for 2 hours, without the anxiety she'd expected, that the particular quality of an ordinary evening dishes, conversation, the small negotiations of people sharing space was not, as she had always implicitly assumed, beneath her or beyond her, but simply unfamiliar. She was learning it. One evening in November, exactly a year after the night in the server room, she arrived at Ethan's apartment with dinner and found Lily already at the table with her homework spread out and the radio on in the kitchen, and the smell of something Ethan had started before she arrived. Lily looked up from her worksheet. "Mom," she said, "Dad made too much pasta again." The word landed in the room and stayed there, simple and enormous. Ethan came out of the kitchen holding a wooden spoon. He looked at his daughter. He looked at Olivia. His expression was careful and warm and waiting. Olivia set the food she'd brought on the counter. She looked at Lily, who was already looking back at her worksheet with the focused innocence of a child who has said exactly what she meant and is done discussing it. "There's never too much pasta," Olivia said, and sat down. There is a kind of person who moves through the world at a frequency others can't quite hear, too quiet, too careful, too absorbed in carrying something invisible to announce themselves. These people get overlooked. They get mocked. They get written up for being late without anyone asking why. They save companies in the middle of the night, and nobody notices. They hold their children's hands in hospitals for years, and nobody sees. They carry everything alone because nobody offered to help, and they have learned from long experience not to ask. Ethan Cole did not change when his life changed. He had been, all along, the same man, the same careful attention, the same compressed competence, the same love for his daughter that operated like a fundamental force, unchanged by circumstance. What changed was who could see him. Olivia Grant did not become a different person. She had always been capable of the things she found herself doing. The showing up, the sitting in waiting rooms, the Friday evenings, the way she had learned to look at Lily and hear the things underneath the words. She had simply never been shown the room where those capabilities lived. She had needed someone to open the door. He had opened the door. That is what it comes down to, sometimes. Not transformation. Not redemption. Just two people arriving at a place where they can see each other clearly, finally, without the obstructions of status or assumption, or the terrible blindness of people who have never had to pay attention. Lily Cole's heart beats steadily. Ethan Cole walks into work early. Olivia Grant leaves early on Fridays. And sometimes when the city goes soft at dusk, and the radio is on in the kitchen, and the pasta is definitely too much, the three of them sit at a small table and negotiate the ordinary, miraculous business of being a family. It is not a perfect life, it is theirs. The people we overlook are not invisible because they have nothing to offer. They are invisible because we stopped looking. Start looking.